Hello, welcome to week 10, chapter 10, sorry. We're going to talk about managing conflict and negotiating. Negotiation. Okay, so here's your objectives. Oops, there we go again. Your objectives are, we're just going to talk about conflict, how it escalates, how we can de-escalate it, strategies for doing that, conflict resolution behaviors, constructive conflict, and then we're going to talk about distributive and integrative negotiation. So this is all about dealing with conflict. Oh, and hold on a second there. Wait a minute. I had that on the wrong side. I had it on the wrong arrow. Okay, so conflict. Basic definition, disagreement through two or more parties perceive a threat to their interests, needs, or concerns. There's dysfunctional conflict and constructive conflict. Dysfunctional conflict focuses on emotions and differences. Constructive conflict is adaptive, and it balances the interests of both parties. There's a negotiation there. There's a will to find the best mutually beneficial solution for constructive conflict. And when we're thinking through those alternatives, it can lead to better ideas, new ideas. So, there are many types of conflict in organizations. There's task conflict, process conflict, relationship conflict, conflicts of interest, values conflict. So, task is when you're in a disagreement about what your tasks or goals are, or maybe someone else's tasks or goals. That can be based on a misunderstanding of goals. It could be based on someone doesn't think you're doing a task the right way. Even if there might be more than one right way, and then that can lead to a conflict. Actually, that's more of a process conflict, is how to accomplish a task. That's probably would be more of a process conflict, sorry. But so in task conflict, it might be more of a confusion of the task itself, but process would be like how to accomplish that task. Maybe there's some conflict or disagreement there. Relationship conflict is pretty obvious. Conflicts of interest or competition over resource constraints. That involves things like you can get in situations of bribery or improper access, things like that. So that's an integrity issue as well. So that happens often in organizations. Values conflict, that is when belief systems do not mesh well, and that can cause problems as well. So these are all types of conflict. Information conflict is when people don't have the information, they're misinformed, or there's a different interpretation. So you might find yourself in conflict with someone, but you don't have all the facts, for example, or you misinterpreted something, and that caused the conflict. Task interdependence, in that case, one person is dependent on another for resources or information, and that can cause a problem. A quick example would be, you're working on a project. You need this person from HR to help you with your project, but somebody over in another team needs that person too. So you're going to be in conflict with that person for a resource, which is this HR person to help you do your project. Structural conflict results from structural or process features of the organization. So that could be an issue where the way things are structured or processes are done in the organization could cause a conflict. All right. Okay, so the best conflict resolution behaviors is empathy. Try to put yourself in the other person's position. Focus on interests and not positions. So, you know, like I said, basic empathy. Focus on interest. How can we both get what we want? Consider solutions to the problem. Brainstorm. Express emotions honestly, but be respectful. Make the first move in a positive way. Write down where you agree and where you don't agree and see where you can meet in the middle. Emphasize the common interests, but not the differences. And then identify 3 to 4 actions the other party would like you to take. These are all ways to help, basically, with constructive conflict. This is how you constructively deal with conflict. These are some behaviors. Now, the worst behaviors are just avoiding it, ignoring it, not speaking to the person, winning no matter what, just being angry, being frustrated, insulting the other person, getting revenge, retaliating. I'm sorry. Meeting separately with people in conflict, trying to play one person off another. Lying, making the other person look bad. There's you can think of a million ways that, these are all poor behaviors. You cannot win a conflict you don't really win it, but you cannot solve a conflict by doing these things. I'm sure you can think of more things that would be poor behavior. Negotiation. Well, we know what negotiation is, but there's different types. There's distributive and then there's integrative. Okay, so in distributive, a gain to one party is offset by an equivalent loss to the other party. In integrative, a win-win negotiation is which the agreement involves no loss to either party. Okay, so the 4 fundamental principles of this is you separate the relationship from the issues first. So you get rid of your personal feelings against for that person are separated from the issues at hand. And then focusing on the interest. What is your interest? What are their interests? How can they meet? How can you negotiate and meet in the middle? What do I absolutely need? Not what I want. What do I need? What's the minimum I can take? What's the minimum they can take or lose or whatever it is? That's where you have to talk about needs versus wants. Look for new solutions to the problem that will allow both sides to get what they need, which is winning. Insist on outside objective fairness criteria. Sometimes you need to bring a third person in to look at the situation and see if it's objective and fair. That might be necessary during negotiations. Effective negotiation is when you make sure each side knows the other's interests and how they view the issues. This goes back to what do you need? Not what you want, but what do you need? What's the minimum that you can accept? You build up from that. Minimum, if you can. Identify and use sources of leverage. If you have leverage, identify that and make sure that you can use that. Show understanding to the other side that you understand what their position is and why. Do not show emotions. Do not get upset. Do not get angry. And know your that's your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Know your BATNA. BATNAs are great. I mean, these are the things you want to bring to the table for negotiation. If you have an alternative to this agreement and it's better, it's pretty good, then that's going to influence the other person to think, well, maybe I need to go ahead and negotiate with this person. Okay, alternative dispute resolution is when a third party has to come in and pretty much overcome your stalemate. If you cannot come up with an agreement together, then a third party can come in and do that. Now, there's different types. There's mediation, arbitration, conciliation. An ombudsman is someone who investigates complaints and then mediates fair settlements. And conciliation is when a third party builds a positive relationship, improves their communication, and facilitates their discussion. There might be a suggestion here, but it's not a binding one. In other words, they can say, no, I don't think so, or they can accept it. That's conciliation. That's different from mediation. And a partial third party comes in and facilitates a discussion using logic and persuasion. So the mediator goes a little further and suggests alternatives and establishes each side's priorities. So they go a little bit further than a conciliator. And then they suggest a settlement, but it's not legally binding either. But in arbitration, it is. Arbitration could be required or voluntary. You may have you ever signed something requiring mandatory arbitration? There's so many business contracts, business deals, I think even credit cards. You have to sign something saying you will agree to mandatory arbitration. That means if you have an issue, you have to go through this instead of court. If you sign a document, some employers make you do it now. You have to sign an arbitration agreement. You don't have to if you don't want the job, but I think that if you want the job, for some of these, you have to. So it's becoming more and more common. And then basically the arbitrator, the negotiating parties establish rules for the arbitrator, but then the arbitrator's decision is binding. It always results in a settlement, and it has a greater potential to leave one party dissatisfied. So I would read up on arbitration. Well, you already are probably in your text, but if you want some more information, it's definitely something that is becoming more common. And whenever you sign that, you pretty much sign your rights away. For a court case, you got to go through arbitration. So anyway, that's all for this week. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. And just remember, I'm just going to just say this one more time. The conciliator, because I kind of, sometimes I get too fast. I apologize. But the conciliator is more of a facilitator of communication. They basically try to demonstrate build a positive relationship between you two. It's more of a, I don't know, like a consultant. But then the mediator does more work in the fact that it pretty much lays out your arguments and alternatives and priorities. So they do a little bit more than that. And then the arbitrator, pretty much, you're binded to whatever decision they make. So, I mean, you can have voluntary. There is voluntary arbitration. But most of the time it's mandatory. Anyway, so I just wanted to clarify that again. You have different levels of involvement there. All right, so that's all there is for this week. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know, and have a great week. Thanks for listening.